Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Schlage. This is their part number B571 in a 613 finish. The part number that we have here gives us the all of the information necessary to properly specify the part number, which means it's a B571. It's an occupancy indicator. It's for a 2 1/4 inch thick door, and it has been extended equally so that the lock latch bolt remains in the center of that door. It has a 12-288 latch bolt. It has a 10-094 strike. It has the 61-509 emergency key, and it's in 613. All of those other part numbers, the latch, the strike, the key, that all would come. When you say B571, that's what you're going to get. It is considered best practice to detail all of those parts, so the factory is quite clear, although it is considered certainly acceptable to not be forced to qualify that part number when it's the only way you can get it. That is not the case with this material in terms of the latch and strike. There are other options, but that emergency key, that's going to come with. Now, the 2 1/4, that's important to know because they literally need to change the parts. Now, what this client is doing specifically with this lock is they have a 2 1/2 inch thick door. This will not fit. There are not parts long enough. Having said that, would it be impossible to determine the thread type of the bolt? It's probably 1032. Would it be impossible to derive how you might be able to get that installed so that it all fits on a thicker door? No, of course not. A longer connecting bar, you'll be able to determine what size this is and buy a piece of steel for it. However, getting those parts from the factory is definitely going to be based on the fact that they've got only parts listed for up to that door thickness. Actually, I take that back. They likely can do it thicker, but extended equally up to 2 1/4 is a no-charge add. Okay. So with that one screw put in there, just a few turns, I'm getting to about 2 1/2 inch. So you can understand how that door thickness is really going to be 2 1/4 maximum. Now, how is this client going to contend with the fact that their door is thicker? Well, we had extensive discussion. You can certainly do occupancy indicators on types of locks for thicker doors. I'm thinking mortise locks. You'll be able to handle any door thickness. The issue is the cost goes up by orders of magnitude. So what I've suggested to the client, and we've done it with complete success with other clients in the past, is take the door and then take a Forstner bit, which is a flat bottom cutting bit, and literally drill in from each side 1/8 of an inch. The diameter necessary for the outside indicator, which is, whatever size this is. About 2 3/4. Then the inside thumb turn, about 2 5/8 or so. Now, realizing that you don't necessarily have Forstner bits laying around in that size, which I don't think Bob Vila does, you'll need to come up with some way of being able to accomplish that. I might consider creating a router template that I can clamp to the door and then using hole saws to give me the ability to work that. Doing it with a hammer and chisel, that's a non-starter. That's not going to work. So you'll need to do that. Now, we've also done this. That will work successfully for this client, absolutely. What you have to be mindful of when we go in 1/8 of an inch, no problem. But if he were to sink this in 3/4 inch, let's say, now 3/4 inches out here, your hand is going to be contained within that prep. Probably still not a big deal, but you need to think about when you use that trick. And I've done it on, I had a client earlier this year. We did Schlage AL series storeroom locks, Jupiter design on might have been 2 1/2 inch or 2 1/4. No, I think it was 2 3/4. And we got the client up to, say, 2 1/4. What you have to be mindful is that return back on the lever, because that's going to end up hitting the door because you're installing that door onto what it thinks is a thinner door. So be mindful. We did a Jupiter because that's a straighter lever, not the Saturn and not the Neptune, I think it's called, in the AL series, the big curve lever. So when you're doing certain little tricks like that, be aware of what side effects it could cause. But in this case, routing that door 1/8 of an inch thinner or even a 1/4 inch thinner on one side is probably not going to be a big deal. When you're dealing with thick doors where that latch bolt falls in terms of the connecting hardware, I don't think is going to be a big deal. But you ideally want to center it because you're going to be looking at your jamb for the strike prep and saying, okay, I'm thinking about not centering it, but I'm thinking about positioning it from the face of the stop to the center of the jam, so the center of the rabbet is going to equal half of the door thickness plus the distance from the face of the door to the face of the stop, which in the closed position there's going to be a tiny amount, so that when the door hits the stop, actually you're probably going to have a small allowance there, a very small allowance. So let's do a visual tour. Here's the outside. Here's the business end. That's what you're paying the money for right here. Occupancy indicator. In use, vacant. In use, vacant, in use. So what's happening here is, very interestingly, throw it to one way, throw it to the other way. That makes this unit non-handed. You can throw the thumb turn either way and it will always give you an in use. They say that when you install this, they're telling us to install it with the vacant centered. If you see that rectangular silhouette, it's literally a decal that's been applied to the face of it saying, install it so it's centered. Okay, so that decal literally was on there just like that when it arrived. We're going to have our thumb turn. That thumb turn is going to sit either in this position or in this position. That works out perfectly because the positioning of the cam to drive the occupancy indicator is either at a 45 or at a, whatever, 315, whatever that is, degree. Okay, so that makes sense. The latch bolt. What's nice about the latch bolt is that it's 2 3/8 or 2 3/4. You can probably do a 5-inch on this as well. I don't know. I would think you can get a 5-inch back set in a B500 series. 1-inch typical latch projection, 2 1/4 by 1 inch wide. Complementary finish. Okay. Strike plate. That's going to be 2 3/4 by 1 1/8. Dust box. You're going to notice there's a couple of odd holes and then 2 holes that you may expect. These 2 odd holes are for the security screws. There are 3 here. Oh, there are 3. There are 3 security screws. 2 for these here, 1 for back down into the dust box. Okay. Why are they biased or offset? You want those to be towards the stop of the frame because you have your stud. My frame is going to be larger than my stud, wider. This is going to be, if it's a 2x4, a wood stud, it's going to be 3.5 inch. Well, my jamb is going to be 4 13/16. I want those screws, those security screws, to hit the stud, not hit over here, and that's why they bias those big screws. Absolutely pre-drill that hole and use a very good fitting bit when you drive that in. You don't want to stall when you're running these long screws. These have to be every bit of 3 inch. Yeah, 3 inch. So be mindful of that. The other 2 screws here and here will of course be for the strike. Okay. Other than that, we have the mounting plate and the 2 bolts that will go to the housing here and here. We have the 2 very small armor front style screws to hold the thumb turn through those 2 holes here and here, so the thumb turn screws to the plate. We have 2 screws for the latch bolt. And then the final thing is that emergency key. This emergency key can be purchased separately. So if we're in use, okay, I can put that emergency key inside of there. And I can manipulate that bolt. So I can, you know, should someone become, you know, incapacitated or just locked in, you can get in. I recall when I was a child, very young child, 5 years old, my great-grandmother went into the bathroom, and their home was in a town called Norwich, which is actually an island surrounded by the city of Chicago. Meaning to leave Norwich, you have to go through Chicago to get anywhere else. This home was 1905 construction. Okay, so the house is like this. Granny is how we all knew her, Granny. Her name is Helen, was Helen. Granny went into the bathroom and couldn't get out. And she could, and we know that she's okay because we can hear her laughing. She was a very hearty sort of person who was incredibly joyous at all times. But she got locked in the bathroom. And the reason that she did is because the door was very ill-fitting, meaning the margin between the edge of the door and the jamb was so small that when you rotated the knob, a knob doesn't pull the latch bolt back 100%. The latch bolt sticks out ever so slightly, and just that tiny amount was preventing her from being able to get out. And so, of course, all of my uncles, my great-uncles, cousins to the nth degree, were able to very quickly overcome that. Being carpenters, most of them, or some sort of tradesmen actually, were able to quickly overcome that. They didn't try to Lloyd the latch, which later in life I would have done myself, and the door swung out actually, which is interesting. They just tapped the hinge pins out and the door came out. Point of the matter is, you need a way to get in, and luckily they had access to the hinge pins. That's the emergency key. Let's switch to the screen view and take a closer look at some supporting documentation. Okay, so here is the item that we are indeed looking at. Not much to see here, but let's go through the documents down below. So we have the installation instructions. This shows the greater assembly. What's nice that they're doing here is giving you a bill of materials of what you ought to have in the package. This is the 571. This is the one we're dealing with. We're not dealing with a 581, which is a blank plate only one side. That's when someone wants a thumb turn on one side only, but they have a 2 1/8 inch hole through the door. So you've got to have something on the outside to get that attached. Thumb turn, mounting plate, exterior indicator, latch bolt, strike reinforcer, or slash dustproof strike as well. We're not going to talk about the preparation of the door at length in terms of how to drill it, how to prep it. If you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to me and I can speak to you at length on how to drill a steel door, a fiberglass door, aluminum, obviously a wood door. What's nice about this line of Schlage locks is that they still preserve the 1.5 or 2 1/8. I would encourage you to go with the smallest hole possible. I simply believe removing less of the door is preferable rather than removing more of the door. What I don't love is that the size of the hardware is intended for that greater diameter. What I would like to have in a perfect world would be where the footprint of the hardware was simply smaller, as they had on the B100, the B160 series, or the 100 series. The B400 series, long discontinued, that was 1.5 inch only, and I loved it because it was petite on the face of the door. While it's nice that these are convertible, so you can take your existing Schlage lock that has an 1.5 inch hole and still use a B500 series, you're not going to have that same small, petite footprint. Okay, they're showing us here how to prep the edge of the door depending on your faceplate, square corner, radius corner, or drive-in. showing you how to pull that off should you need to. Very simple and straightforward how to pop that faceplate off. It becomes obvious when you look at the underside of the latch bolt where to insert that screwdriver to pry that outer plate off. Rotating the back set, we quickly demonstrated that. If you've got a 581, you'll look here. We won't, because we don't. Okay? They want that set on this cross pattern, on this X pattern, set to vacant. Those two funny bolts will go through the mounting plate through the latch bolt. Latch bolt is mounted top, or indicated top, to the outside. At that point, it's just literally installing the connecting bar to that area on the outside, bringing the thumb turn over it, and the two small screws to hold it onto the mounting plate. You might need to cut this to length. I don't know. You might need to, depending on what actual thickness you have. I can tell you that it actually measures 2 7/8, so it's likely you're going to have to trim that down. Now the next document is, this is a frame preparation. It's really just talking about the same information about how to prep the door and frame, but it adds some detailed information on how to prep for the strike and the reinforcer. You'll notice that those two holes are towards the face of the stop here. You'll pre-drill those holes. They're saying 5/32 of an inch, 3 inch deep, and that hole down in the cavity as well, and then sink those 3 long screws into it. I might be tempted to put the center one in first. Then your strike, you'll finish that off. They didn't indicate what size to pre-drill for that, for those holes. You can just measure the root diameter of the screw and you'll know what it is, and probably go 85% of the root diameter of the screw, and that would be the size I would drill. A template for, well, this is actually a metal door. Oh no, they say it's a wood door template. So edge of the door to the center line, whatever you like. 2 3/8 or 2 3/4. They're showing you 1.5 inches, so they're saying do an 1.5 inch hole, but you can do 2 1/8 as well. In the edge of the door, they're saying 1.8 inches wide and 2 1/4 tall. That's not accurate, in the sense that this is a 1 inch wide unit, so be mindful to measure that first. You've got a 1 inch wide latch bolt here. And that's another thing. You can order the B500 with an 1.8 inch wide latch bolt as well, like you'd more commonly see in a hollow metal door, in a steel door. Okay. Now there is a link here to the manufacturer's page. From there you can pull up not only all of the Schlage products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog, as well as several and many encyclopedic documents that are here. Lots of stuff for you to be able to review, such as the service manual, template index, cylinders and key blanks quick reference guide. That's really handy because it will allow you to look at all of the key blanks that they have, and meaning why waste the time and energy to try to remember what a Everest 29 key blank part number is. Well, it's 35270 or 35269 for a control, but you don't need to memorize it. It's right here. That document's handy. Speaking of handy documents, I also have a handy document here because I always forget. I always forget what here it is, the suffix is. Cylinder suffix guide. If someone were to say to me TD, I wouldn't immediately remember what that is, but it's full-size construction core. P and L, R, B, J. I remember those, but not all of them, so that's handy to know what those cylinder suffixes are. Also, there is a Everest cylinder manual, a Primus cylinder manual. If you deal at all with Primus, you'll want to review this governing document. It's phenomenal. Just lots of other stuff. In addition to important material, we've got some archival catalogs here as well. If you want to see what Schlage was doing in 1972, here it is. Let's wrap up this video on camera. Now, the name Schlage is synonymous with door hardware for almost 100 years. I believe that the patent, I believe that Walter Schlage got his start in about 1921 and has several patents, dozens, I believe. And there is a patent that he has that's important. We all use it every day. It's where he actually contained the cylinder within the operating trim. And all of us pretty much use a lock that incorporates the cylinder inside of the knob or lever. That was a Walter Schlage, known as the Lock Wizard. Patent is what it was. The name Schlage is synonymous with very high quality locks in the commercial realm as well as the residential realm. Their commercial materials, of course, going to be the D or ND series cylindrical locks. Their L series, their B600 series deadbolts. They have an L400 series mortise deadbolt. What is most notable from my perspective is their technical support is superb. There are many things that you simply cannot determine by looking at the service manual or the catalog, and their folks over there are always responsive. You're going to find generally with Schlage that there's always inventory pretty available and ready to ship. Schlage versus her competition of Yale and Sargent and Corbin Russwin and Best, on and on and on. You'll find the Schlage name to be pretty well respected, understood, and acknowledged in terms of a high quality lock. They're going to be able to do in the realm of restricted or high security cylinders. They're going to be able to do other than, which is not it, their classic series. They go to the Everest 29, which has a check pin. After that, you can get into the Primus, which will have side pins or finger pins, and then you can do different levels of Primus to make the restriction deeper and deeper. They have an SL type of cylinder platform, and if you are at all interested in the science of cylinders and cylinder construction and high security and restricted keyways, you'll want to take a look at Schlage's SL cylinder. Quite interesting, a confluence of many different types of technologies happening. So in conclusion, a nice quality deadbolt from a very nice quality company and typical material. I was about to say occupancy indicators are much more common today than they have been historically, and I can't explain why, but 10 years ago the availability of occupancy indicators on locks was far less than it is now. In fact, while you could certainly do occupancy indicators on mortise locks, you now see them available in deadbolts, and you now see them and that's been, occupancy indicators on deadbolts have been around for a very long time. But you also see them in tubular lever locks as well, where there is an option to be able to turn that thumb turn and be able to change inside of the exterior rows, vacant, occupied, or whatever the terminology is. Speaking of Schlage and occupancy indicators, when you get into their L series, you can have options when it comes to locked, unlocked, occupied, unoccupied, vacant, things of that nature. So there's more language that's possible. And I think there's a third option where it's just symbols only, that sort of option. If you have any questions on the B571 and a 613 finish or any other Schlage product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. If you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please click subscribe as well, and even share the video with someone that you know. And if you have any questions for a future video, please send them our way and we will make every attempt to oblige. And thank you very much.